Hello, testing, testing. Hello, hello, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, testing. Okay, what's up?
Try to create an app, but it doesn't let me, and I've installed Node.js. It says error, but I've installed Node.js and I've did everything. I don't know why it doesn't work. It's NPA, create app, and I called it try.
Dash.
Dash it's
Okay. Ya todavía.
fine.
All right, let's take a look at it. Yeah. Yeah, we'll take a look at it together. All right. All right. Okay, let's settle down. Welcome back. Hello. Welcome back. Let's see. So we're on web dev, right? I'm in the right room. Yeah. So last lecture we introduced the course, went over the syllabus, all the topics that we'll be covering, and we were just about to get started on discussing HTML and getting you started with the assignments. So let's recap real quick where we are and where we might be going. So we're at the lecture week 1, I guess. Last week was week 0. It was a kind of a weird half week. So yeah, so we introduced the course. We're gonna get started on HTML. The first assignment. We're gonna get you going today with that. We'll do a lot of live coding, and I'm gonna push as much as we get done today, I'll push it to a GitHub repository, and you're welcome to use any of it or none of it if you want, and to get you going with the the labs, in particular the second half, which is a little more challenging, that asks you to use what you learn in the labs to then go in and start creating a website, right? A web app. Well, not a real website. We're focusing here on creating web applications. So applications that run on the web, right? On not just static websites that don't interact with users. We're looking for something that might as well be implemented on a desktop application, right? Or on a phone that you can interact with it, and you can create content and delete and update. So we're doing the same thing, but with web technology, right? So we'll get you started with that. The first assignment is not going to look very pretty, and that's fine, because in the second assignment, when we get to it in about 2 weeks from now, we'll revisit the content, right? And we'll apply CSS to make it a little more professional, a little more polished. But that's a little later. All right, so that's what we're doing in the next couple of weeks. The week after that, when we get to the JavaScript assignment, we'll start talking about how we can make these applications dynamic, right? The first couple of assignments, we're working with static content, right? That doesn't change over time. Ignores any clicks or drags or types. We can't change the content, right? It's all static. That's for the first 2 assignments. But when we get to the assignment 3, we'll come back and use JavaScript and React.js and routing and whatnot, right? To add the dynamic portion of it, right? So that can be data driven, so that you can have objects and data structures that change over time as users interact with the data. Right, so that's the plan for the next couple of weeks. Next week there'll be our first quiz that it'll be based on the first assignment, the HTML, that you're going to be working on this week. Okay, let's see. I think that's it. Any questions before we get started? Yes. Yeah, I think right now it's better for you to be a passive listener and see me do things and try to follow along. If you want to review the video, right, it'll be recorded for you. If you want to go a little bit slower and want to go over it, and then try to follow me, right? In the assignment, then you can then take it easy and go through each one of the exercises. There's a lot of live coding. Right, it's not canned, right? It's all very spontaneous. I might run into some issues, some errors that maybe you can help me get out of. Okay, so pay attention. All right, thank you. All right, so yeah, so the topic for these week and a half is learning to be confident about HTML. What is HTML? So let's review real quick what HTML is. So whenever you visit anything on the web, right? Anything that you see drawn or any content, tables and lists and icons and hyperlinks and whatnot, it's all created using this language called HTML, right? And you can see behind the scenes on most browsers, I would say every one of them, they will have an options where you can inspect the page, right? And when you inspect the page, you kind of see what's behind the scenes, right? How was this document created, right? And so this tool here which appearing here on the right, it's for developers mostly, right? It's not meant for for end user consumption. It's mostly for us that are creating this content. Yes, and there's 3 large portions to the content. One of them here in the tab, the Elements tab, it shows here the HTML code that the browser is rendering on the left-hand side. Okay, this is the notice that it's a hierarchical structure document, right? It's hierarchical. It has a root, which is the HTML element over here. We call these elements or nodes as well. And it has two portions, the head portion up here, right, has the body portion up here. And notice that as I hover on the right-hand side, it highlights on the left what is being rendered, what does that node specifically is rendering on the left side, right? Notice that if I hover over the head, it doesn't highlight anything, right? So because the head is meant for meta information, who the author is, when was this created, what other dependencies does this document have, right? Any CSS libraries, any JavaScript stuff that I need, but it's not really responsible for rendering anything other than perhaps the title that you see here, cs4550. Maybe that's the only thing you could see here in the head. Other than that, everything else is in the body, right? So if I hover over the body, notice that it highlights everything. Yes. Now you can be more specific and say, well, what about this particular hyperlink? Who's rendering that? So it opens up and it navigates through the whole hierarchy of this data structure, and it highlights that there's this anchor tag or this anchor node that has an H reference that points to course blah 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 blah. Meaning that if you click on that hyperlink, that's where it's going to navigate to. Make sense? Right? And notice that I've highlighted on A, it highlights this hyperlink. Right? Now if I go a little higher, notice that as I go up higher, right, it just embarks more and more. It contains more and more of the content. Yes. So this div is this one little blue here, right? If I go even higher, right, notice that it selects more and more, part of the portion of the content. Everybody good? Makes sense. If I go even higher, it gets to this LI or line item, right? If I go a little higher, it goes to this UL or unordered list. It's a list of unordered items. Yes. Which contains all these line items over here. See, all these are line items within this UL. Everybody good? Okay. So basically, HTML is it's an ASCII text file, right? That gets parsed by a browser, right? And it creates a data structure out of this HTML text file. And what we see here is the result of the browser having interpreted that HTML document. Yes. Okay. Now this hierarchy, this data structure is referred to as the DOM or DOM. The document object model. Right. It's an acronym. It's going to be on the quiz. What does the DOM mean? Right. Tell me what each letter means. And this data structure, entirely, completely defines what gets rendered on the left side. Everybody good? Yeah. So this course is all about. Okay. Well, how do we deal with this data structure, right? That's all this course is all about. How do we create this data structure, right? This DOM data structure, applying all sorts of software engineering principles, okay, with object orientation and best practices and whatnot. Yes. Now I could go to a line item and delete that line item, and it's gone. Notice that the user interface updates. See that? So if I delete this line item, that content is gone. See that? Right. So one of the things that we're going to be learning is that, how do we, instead of doing that manually, right, and me having to go and modify this data structure manually, can we do that programmatically, right? And that's where JavaScript comes in, right? So if you go to sources, you'll see there's lots of JavaScript in here that we can take a look at that source code, and that source code is responsible for rendering this content. A lot of it is static, but much of it is also dynamic. Right. And it entails typically going out to a server and asking for the server, hey, give me the list of modules. Right. And then for each module, give me all the line items. Right. And then this data structure, this JSON object data structure gets downloaded, and it programmatically iterates, right, adding all these line items. Make sense? Right. Some of it is static and there's no computation. Right. It's just one long string. And some of it is dynamic. Right, and as I hover, it does things. Now, obviously, I'm modifying the data structure here. I'm not literally modifying the original content. I'm modifying just the the DOM instance of this document that lives in the memory of the browser, right? If I refresh the screen, it's going to go out to the server again, right? Fetch the real content again, and just re-render what gets updated here. Okay. So the focus of this week is let's try and recreate this HTML to get something like this, right? Somewhat of the layout of what it looks like on the left side. It's not going to look identical, obviously, right? We're going to come back later in the second assignment, and we're going to focus on this bottom half over here. This bottom half controls the look and feel of the screen, right? It tells you that this should be black, that the icon should be red, that the font should be white, right? That there should be a green bar, that there should be these icons, that this should be justified to the right or to the left, okay? That there should be some padding all around, right? It tells you that we call it that it controls the box model, right? This box model comes from this below, that every piece of rectangle on the screen, every piece of little rectangle is controlled by the margin all around, right? The border, right? The padding all around, and then the actual content, right? The size of the content, plus the X and Y position, right, of where that rectangle falls on the screen. Yes, right. So we're going to cover that in the second assignment. Right? How do we come back and make this our ugly version into something that looks a little more closer to what we have here? Yes, right. So that's the second assignment, and then on the third assignment we'll come back to it and say, okay, well, instead of this being static, right? Can we have some data that make this a little more dynamic? Like, for instance, I want to be able to maybe add a module or delete a module or move a module, right? Or I want to edit a module. I want to have a form where I can edit my module, right? So for that we'll need a JavaScript, right? And that's the third assignment. Pretty good. All right. Yeah. So let's get started creating some HTML. I'm not going to go over the labs and the slides. You can go over that on your own. Instead, I'm going to use the second half of this assignment, which is the more challenging one, and just get started working on the Kanbas application. We'll do some work here together. Again, feel free to reuse any of the content that I provide you from the GitHub repository that I will share. I'm also not going to follow identical the steps that are listed here, right? We do want to make it a little challenging. All right, so let's do that together, and as we go, right, we'll cover some of the content that you would cover in the labs, right? Because we'll deal with forms and tables and lists and all the good stuff. Everybody good? All right. Okay, so let's take a look at the project that we had just created right before we left. Right, we had created this React application, right? Using npx create React app Kanbas something or other. Yes, and it created this content here, right? Let's go over it real quick. The package JSON is a descriptor describing that this is a Node.js project, and also lists all the dependencies that this project has on other libraries. And then we said that the all web application all start at public, in the public directory. Anything that we drop into that directory, the server is making it publicly available to the rest of the world. Well, right now it's only on my laptop, right? But when I publish this on a public server, anything I drop in the public directory is made available to everyone, right? So, for instance, we can start this project by running npm start. This kicks off a local server, Node.js server, and it navigates to the root of my application, right? And this is the boilerplate default React application that is meant for you to start editing it, right? And this gets rendered. This content gets rendered by this, right? So let's take a look at it real quick. If we go into index.html, this is the file that gets served up by the server, right? When you navigate to CNN.com or Wikipedia.com, right? Usually, when you if you go to Wikipedia, right? Notice that you're not providing any particular, asking for any particular document, right? And so what the server does is that if you don't ask for any particular file, right, it gives you by default this index file, right? This index.html. Notice that if I generate here a particular file and say hello that text, right, and I ask for hello that text, I didn't put anything here. Hello world. There it is, hello world, right? So I asked for that specific file, yes? So anything I dump in the public directory gets served up by the server. So this slash here, this slash over here is mapped physically to this directory here, this public directory. Everybody good? Right? And then I can navigate. If I put other directories in here, right, and test, right, and I put my hello in there, and I move it, right? Notice that if I ask for it again, it's not there because I moved it onto test. Right, so now it's so I can navigate to the file system, right, starting from this root. We call this the root context. This slash here, this first slash, we call the root context, right, from where I can then navigate the entire file system starting at public directory. Make sense? Right. Now notice that if I don't ask for anything, by default, it kicks in asking for the index file, this index over here. And this index file, there's not a lot of stuff in here. The only thing that's in there is this root directory, right? And this root directory doesn't have this image or this text or this link. It says, well, where is all that, right? Well, it turns out that as we get into JavaScript and React.js, there's some little magic that we're not going to get into too much, right? Just to let you know real quick. The magic happens in the source directory. There's a JavaScript file that grabs that root element, right? Grabs that root element by its ID, right? By this index.html. It grabs this root element by its ID, and then it injects the content of this file, which contains the header, the image, the paragraph, the hyperlink. See that, right? And so that's really what React.js is. Right? React.js is basically we're going to dynamically pump content into the HTML document dynamically at runtime. Okay, we don't know how to do that just yet. We'll come back to it in a couple of weeks. Right. So for now, I'm just going to break this because this is not what we're going to do first. I'm just going to break it. So if I refresh, notice it's broken. It's not doing anything anymore. Right. So now I'm just left off with my HTML document with my root div that nobody's pumping any content in there anymore. So I can start doing some work here, right? I can say, I can use my header tags, right? That lets me create headings. Notice that I am in a syntactically correct HTML document. It's a complete static file, right? Text file. It has some head here. That I don't really need a lot. There's a lot of meta stuff here. The title of of what you see here in the tab, right? It says React Web App, right? And I can say here, welcome to web development. I say that. If I refresh, notice that indeed it renders my content. Everybody good, right? And throughout the semester, we're going to be working on labs and Kanbas and whatnot. So we're going to create a couple of directories for each one of these things. So we're going to have labs. We're going to create under the labs directory. And also, we're going to have several assignments. Assignment 1 is going to all be about HTML. And there's going to be a second assignment, which is all about CSS. Yes. And also, we're going to be working today on Kanbas. And in Kanbas, we're going to have a index.html, right? And why index.html? Because I'm going to navigate to /Kanbas, right? And it's going to give me by default that index.html document. right? The server by default is going to give me this file. And I'm just going to put here, H1, Kanbas for now. Right, so I should be able to navigate to /Kanbas. Right, and there it is. I'm inside of that file in that folder. Everybody good? Right? Okay. Also, to make it easy for the TAs to be able to navigate to all these assignments and labs and the Kanbas application once they visit your website, let's create a couple of hyperlinks, to make it easy for them to navigate to your assignment 1, assignment 2, and be able to navigate to your Kanbas application, right? So they can grade you, right? So these are hyperlinks. The A means anchor, right? That allows you to click on it and navigate to something that this text is now connected to. We can say that this is going to go out to href. Allows you to say, if you click on this text, assignment 1, navigate to this other screen, right? To this other HTML document. So we're going to go down to labs, down to A1, right? And maybe in there's an index.html, which I don't believe we put in there, right? Let's put in there an index.html, and let's put in there, assignment 1, right? Same thing for here. We might have an assignment 2, right? And then so in our hyperlinks, we can point to all these places, right? So that you can navigate to the various assignments and also navigate to Kanbas. Right, so if we go back and refresh, we have these 3 hyperlinks, right? So if we click on assignment 1, we can go to assignment 1. If we click on assignment 2, we go, oops, did I not change it? Oh, assignment, 2. I hate computers. So assignment 2 goes to assignment 2, and Kanbas goes to Kanbas. Make sense? Yes. You don't, right? You don't. Yeah, good observation. I don't have to, right? You're right. Yep. One thing that I want to point out is that notice that the heading is taking the entire width of the screen. Yes. Whereas the hyperlinks are not. Even though they're all in their own separate line, right, with tabs and new lines and whatnot. Notice that the heading is taking the entire width of the screen, whereas the hyperlinks are not, right? So we say that the heading is a block element, right? Its layout is behaving that it wants to take up the entire width of the screen, right? And then whatever doesn't fit, it just pushes it down, right? It creates vertical spacing, yes? But we say the hyperlinks are not block elements, they're inline elements, okay? They don't want to take up the entire screen, right? Instead, right, the content just flows from left to right. And when there's not enough space, it just wraps around. Make sense? Right? If you want to add additional space, you can either create a break, right? So it makes a break between the two content, or let's comment that out. We can make a list out of this, right? And for instance, we can put this in an unordered list. We can wrap this whole thing. We can wrap this whole thing in an unordered list, okay? And then each one of these can be their own individual line item in this list. So I can wrap this whole thing, each one of these items, in a line items, right? And do it for all these. You can see line item. And line item. Let's say that. Notice that they render as a bulleted list. Everybody good? Right. So line items and unordered lists are also block elements. Right. Notice that they take up the whole screen and they push other content down. See that? It creates vertical spacing. So most elements are inline elements. right? But there's a few that are block elements that add vertical spacing. Pretty good? Okay. Now the assignment goes in, into much more detail. It has labs specific for, let's talk about block elements and inline elements. So, go over the labs. Labs will introduce each one, right? And it'll give examples and opportunities for you to practice this on your own. Yes? So that's the point of the labs. Okay, so let's focus on Kanbas. So Kanbas is asking the assignment is asking us to build a few things, right? So let's see. The first thing that it asks us to implement is the home screen. This home screen, which is what's rendered here, right? It's this home screen right here. And this home screen, we'll see a little later, that has some peculiar behavior. We say that this particular screen is a responsive screen. Responsive in that, notice that it has 4 columns, but as it gets narrower and narrower, it decides that it doesn't have space to have all 4 columns, and it sacrifices the last one. It sacrifices this last one, right? It hides it, and it takes that space and it gives it to the 3rd column, right? It drops the 4th column, and that space gives it to the 3rd column, so it can fit better. Yes, and then eventually there's not enough space for the other 2 columns on the left, right? And it just drops them, right? So again, to keep the most important part of the content, which is these modules. Everybody good? We say that that's responsive, the responsive design. And the intent is that this content presumably could be consumed in a smaller screen, such as a phone or a tablet or things like that. Yes, the functionality is still there. I still get the menus, right? Either up here or have this other menus down here, right? And I can still navigate, but they're just been relegated to just being hidden, and then you can ask them on demand. We'll get to that when we get to CSS in the next assignment. How to build this, how to make things that are responsive and hide and show and whatnot, depending on the size, right? But not now. We'll do that a little later. Here, we're asked to implement this, and it's made up of a few things. We're made up of 2 sidebars, right, that allow you to navigate. The main content that is, a set of modules, and the right-hand side is a whole bunch of hyperlinks and buttons and whatnot. Yes. Right. So let's build this. For now, we're going to build each independently, right? We'll focus on creating some HTML that only does this, HTML that does only this, HTML that does these modules, and HTML that does that, right? Then we'll come back, copy each one of the little pieces of content. We'll create a table that has 4 columns, and we'll paste the content in each one of the table, in each one of the into the columns. Make sense? So that's going to be the strategy. Now, even though I'm going to build these things independently, we're not going to use them independently, right? We're going to copy them into this one screen. Yes, which is going to be a pain, because we're going to have to do the same thing when we get to say the assignments. Again, we're going to have to have content here. We're going to have to copy into one single screen, right? So there's going to be a lot of copy and pasting, right? Which is going to be a pain. Not until we get to JavaScript, then we can start thinking about, oh, I don't have to copy and paste. I can do that programmatically, right? I could import content, right? And then programmatically just inject stuff wherever I want, so that we don't have to copy and paste ever again. Yes? But we don't know that. We don't know JavaScript just yet. So, just bear with me some of the grunt work of copying and pasting stuff all over the place. All right? Okay. Also, the strategy I'm going to follow of putting stuff in individual files, that's going to allow us to, by the time we get to JavaScript and React, is going to make it really, really trivial to grab these snippets, right? Wrap them in a function, okay, and create a component out of them, right? So that we're going to be able to import, right, and create this dynamically. All right. All right, so that's where we're going. So yeah, so let's do each one of these. It's asking us to do this, which is basically these 4 columns, right? So I'm going to create each one of the columns. Right, so let's do them. Let's do this first one here. The first one is this left column here, right? Which is this one right here. I've called this the Kanbas navigation sidebar, because it allows you to navigate to all sorts of places in Kanbas, right? To courses and your account, your calendar, your dashboard, right? So it's a Kanbas wide navigation sidebar. This one, I've called it the courses navigation bar sidebar because it allows you to navigate inside of a course, a particular course. Yes, right? I've called this I'm going to call this the modules, right? Because there's a whole bunch of modules, week 0, week 1. Each one of these is a different module. And the right-hand side, I forget what I called it, the right-hand sidebar, or whatever. So let's create them all independently. Okay, so let's do that. So in here, inside of the Kanbas directory, actually, I'm going to keep this capitalized because in later assignments, it'll be relevant. The capitalization will be relevant. Right now, it's not too relevant, but let me keep the capitalization like that. All right. Okay, so on the Kanbas, we're going to build a few things. We're going to build the account, the dashboard, courses. So let's create a directory for each one independently, right? So let's create here, account, dashboard, courses, right? And we're working under courses, and under courses, we're going to build this right-hand side. We're also going to need this navigation, right? This navigation. So I'll create another directory called navigation. We'll call it Kanbas navigation, right? And in here will be our index, right? And in here we're going to put the snippet of code that allows you to navigate, right? So there'll be an unordered list of hyperlinks. Right now, we don't know where they're pointing, so I'm just going to put a hash because I don't know where this is pointing just yet, right? And one of the hyperlinks is navigating to Northeastern, so I'll put maybe Northeastern. All the other ones are navigating to account, dashboard, courses. So we can copy this a little bit. Ideally, this would be a nice JavaScript file that you have an array of links and you can iterate over them, right? And you can dynamically generate this, right? We don't know that yet, right? We'll come back to this in our third assignment and rebuild this dynamically, all right? For now, there's a lot of copy and pasting and a lot of rewriting stuff manually. So this is account, this is dashboard, this is calendar, if I can type, inbox, and you can do the rest, right? So I should be able to look at the work I've done so far by navigating there. So we have Kanbas, and we have the Kanbas navigation. There, we have our link for that. Yes. Yes, go ahead. So anytime you find something that is just randomly listing things in a linear order, it's very common to organize it inside of an unordered list. It does have some default styling, like bullets and underline and all that stuff. Usually we override that default styling to make it look whatever we want it to look like. Like for instance, we're going to override this look and feel so that it looks like that instead at some point, right? But the intent of HTML is to create the rough layout, right, of the content, and not so much of what it looks like, right? Because the responsibility for that is CSS, but at least the logical and structure, right, of what the content is, right? It's a list of stuff, right? And it's a very common technique to use either ULs or OLs to structure things that have lists. In particular, notice that that's what they did, right? This is a list, right, of content. We saw how that was actually built, and then obviously they styled it to look with, this way, right? And that's what we're going to do. Yeah, we'll follow that. But it's a very common strategy. Thank you. All right, so we have that. We also need this second list here, right? This second list over here, this one over here, which what I'm going to call the course navigation. Yes, right. And it's going to be I'm going to base it on what I already done with my Kanbas navigation. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to copy this Kanbas navigation, and I'll put it inside of courses, and I'll put a directory in there. I'll call it the course navigation. And in there, I'm going to paste my index which looks very similar to my Kanbas navigation, but I'm going to override it, right? This is going to be what? Home. This is home. Modules. Piazza. Zoom meeting, or just Zoom. Assignments. I'll just add one more. Grades. All right, none of these work just yet, right? They're not pointing to anything just yet. But it's allowing me to just see and work with them independently, right? Of from the rest of the application. Yes. Right. Yeah, exactly. Only the index.html is automatically loaded. Or any other file calls to anything else, you would have to explicitly call it that. Yeah. And we'll do that in a minute. We'll do that in a second. Yep. So we have Kanbas navigation. So then we have course under courses, and then we have course navigation. So this is course navigation. Again, it's not navigating anywhere just yet. All right, so this allows us to work on these independently of everything else, right? And that's also one of the great things when you get to JavaScript and React and whatnot, is that you can work on these modules or these components, these screens independently. You can create unit tests, right, that allow you to confirm that this content is behaving as you expect, right, independently of the rest of the application, right? That's also one of the great things about using modular programming, right, when you get to React.js and whatnot, right? That's because it became so popular. All right, so the other stuff that we're going to implement is this stuff in the middle, right? We'll create this one in the middle, and for this we'll call it modules, right? The modules, right? So let's create here under courses. We're going to create the under home. Right, under courses home, we'll create index.html, which doesn't have just anything just yet. And under home, we'll have the modules. We'll have the modules, index.html. And in here we're going to build this stuff in the middle, right? So we'll have this is basically what, a list, another list. These are a whole bunch of lists, several lists, right? So let's create one list first. We'll create UL. Line item, and this says resources, and we have a syllabus. We have calendar, and we'll have a piazza, and this is for these are resources, and there'll be a separate one maybe a little later that has week 0, and this is intro, right? And additional content, learning objectives, and we'll do HTML. DOM. Okay. Plus at the top, we have a couple of elements here. We have some buttons. We have a couple of drop downs, right? So let's implement a few of those. We can put in a horizontal rule just to separate the content, just to make it have some separation between them. Let's see what we've got so far. Let's go into modules. So this is courses, home, modules. There we go. So we got those 2 lists. Yes. Yep. Here?
Yeah. And under that,
you could do that. Yep, you could do that. For instance, we could have done this. It's a list of lists, right? Yeah, and I think maybe the assignment does ask you to do that, right? Does it? Yeah, actually, it does. The assignment asks you to create a list of lists. So we could do that, right? For instance, this could be a UL, right, where you have a line item, you have a couple line items, where each line item is a separate week, say, right? And then so this could have the resources, the title, maybe even put it inside of a title. Okay, and then this list could live under here. Yeah, you could do that. And this one would be maybe week 0, right? Intro. And then this whole list could live under there. You could do that too. Yep. And then we can style it to make it look whatever we want. Like for instance, this one is going to force some nesting, right? So there's some padding, right? To show the fact that these are lists within lists, right? But in the original rendering, they're all nice and even, right? And that's okay. We can go in later on and use CSS to remove this additional padding, right? And put the borders right here on the left side, as opposed to having all this indentation, right? And that's what we're going to come back with CSS and take a look at that. Yep, excellent. Also, this is H2. There we go. Yes.
Is there any way to like create
Yeah, not yet. When we get to JavaScript, that's what we'll do, right? So when we get to JavaScript, we'll come back to this, right? We're going to wrap this in one big parentheses, right? We'll put this in a return, right? And this will be a function, right? And we'll call this, modules or whatever, right? And this whole thing returns this one big HTML. Once it's a function, right? Now you can import that function and then just use that function anywhere, and you can just paint anything, modules wherever you want it, right? And actually, all these modules, instead of being hard-coded HTML, will be some data structure, right? That you go and fetch the server. The database will come back, say, oh, these are the modules for this section, right? And then you iterate dynamically and render this on the screen. But we don't know that just yet. So we'll come back to that a little later, but excellent question, yes. So in preparation for that, I'm splitting up all these pieces of little contents in separate HTML documents, yes? In preparation for being able to do that, okay? All right, so right now, what we're learning is the building blocks, right, of building all these little user interface widgets, right? And, lists and tables and buttons and drop downs, right? All the basic building blocks of building a user interface. Right, so for buttons, right, we can just use buttons. So button, and we have a collapse all button, collapse all button. We have a view progress button. And so this is a view progress button. And we have a module to add a module. So this is module. And we have this drop down, right? So let's create that drop down. A drop down can be implemented with the select option, tag, select, which allows you to provide all sorts of different options from where you can select an option, right? So this one adds the publish all is the default, publish all. And then we have a couple more. We have publish all modules and items, publish all modules and items, publish modules only, and unpublish. So unpublish. Save that. And if we render, notice that we have those drop downs and buttons here on the right-hand side, on the left side. Everybody okay? Right? Notice that this, is far from looking what we want it to look like just yet, right? So not quite. Okay, but again, that we're going to revisit this on the second assignment, right? To paint it to look like this. All right, so I think we're somewhat ready to start filling in the blanks on on just grabbing all this content and putting it to actually build this screen. Yes. But before that, let's revisit these. Now that we have at least one of the first modules, right? Let's revisit what these hyperlinks will look like, right? Where should they render? Where should they navigate? Like if I click on this home here, right, it should navigate to this screen that has these two sidebars, the modules in the middle. Oh, we forgot the right-hand side just yet. I'm gonna leave that for you. Where should it navigate? Should it navigate to? I mean, we have the modules, this is inside of an index file, yes, right? But that's not what we wanted to navigate. We wanted to navigate not necessarily only to the index file. We wanted to navigate to something that builds this whole thing, right? Because this home, right? Notice if we go back to our course navigator, if we say that home navigates to where? Kanbas, starting at the root, right? Kanbas. Courses, home, and then the index file in there, right? What would happen here? Let's go, let's refresh. Notice if I hover over home, down at the bottom, you can't see, it shows the URL. It shows the URL. Can you see that? See localhost 3000, Kanbas courses /home. See that? Where is that? I think that's going to go into the index file now. All right, so if I click on it, it didn't work. Where's it going? Oh, okay, no, because it's under modules, right? It's under modules. Yeah, it's under module. So what should home be? What should home be? Home should be the combination, right, of the modules and the sidebars. Yes, right. So let's do that. Let's build that, right? So we could go in here and say, okay, in home, this index file will be what? Needs to be the two sidebars and the modules, right? So how do we create that? Well, one lazy way of building it is using tables, right? There is no native mechanism in HTML to render things horizontally. Things just tend to render vertically, okay? Now, text and things like that does render from left to right, right, inline, right? And everything else, the paragraphs, line items, headings, they all render vertically, but there's no easy way to just render things horizontally, right? One misuse is to use tables for that, right? Tables allows you to create a grid, right, of columns and rows, which, you know, a row having many cells allows you to render things horizontally. Yes, right. So this limitation of HTML is what caused early on, right, to folks misuse tables for this layout, right, laying things horizontally. Today is somewhat frowned upon that you would use a table for this purpose. Instead, you would use divs and you would use CSS, right, or use Flex, right, to render things horizontally. But we don't know that yet. We haven't seen CSS. We haven't seen Flex just yet. So I'm going to misuse tables for this. So tables are meant to be used for tabular data, right, where you have records. Each record has the same fields, right? And you have lots of data. They're not meant for layout purposes, right? But nevertheless, I'm going to misuse that. I'm going to say a table has a body, it has rows, and it has columns. And you can have any number of columns. In our case, we have 4 columns, right? We have 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yes, right. In the first one, we're going to have the Kanbas navigation. In the second one, we're going to have the course navigation. And the middle one, we're going to have the modules. And the last one, I don't know what I call this, course status. Right. So if we navigate to home and I refresh, now this is this table. Well, it doesn't look too much of a table. It looks just one single line. Actually, we can, you can't see the table, and you can change this to have the border be at least 1 pixel wide. So now you can see the table. You can see the borders of the cells, the row, and the columns. Yes, right. Also, it tends to be scrunched up, right? It's as small as it can be, right? But we can widen it so that it takes up the entire width of the screen by saying that we want the width to be 100%, right? Now, so again, these here are called the elements, right? The elements or nodes, the HTML elements or nodes, right? Also referred to as tags. We call this the opening tag, and we call this the closing tag. right? Notice that this TR has a matching TR down here with a slash. See that? Right? We call that the closing tag. Together, they make up a node, right, or an element, right? If you think about it in a hierarchical tree, this is a node in that tree. Yes, inside of another node, the T body, right? Inside of another node, the table body, or the table. Yes, right. And these over here, we call them the attributes. Attributes allow you to configure the behavior of a particular element. You know, its width, right? Its size, you know, and different nodes have different attributes. Okay, right? All right. So what else? Okay, so we should now be able to just go in and start copying and pasting the content of what we already have. The Kanbas navigation. We go back to Kanbas navigation. We can copy this content and just paste it in here. Right? We can take out the course navigation, take the content and paste it in home here. Oops, copy, paste. We can take the modules here. We can copy that and paste it inside of the home. This modules here. Right, so that if we come back and refresh, we have, you know, we have 3 of the 4 columns. Everybody good? Now, I did it a little bit too prematurely, right? Because I only configured the home link, but I never did the Zoom or assignments or grades link, right? So I wasn't done. I wasn't really done with each one of those pieces, right? And I just copied and pasted it. If now I want to make a change, right, and I have pasted this over in multiple screens, I'm going to have to maintain all 3 or all 4 copies and paste, right? So it's a pain in the butt. So ideally, I would do this when I'm done, right? When I'm complete, when I have completed, I'm fully, entirely happy with all these things, right? So for instance, I might provide here a sample of what I really want to do. So this courses, you know, modules, probably. You know, these don't exist yet, right? This is my Piazza, right? And this would be a Zoom. This would be, you know, assignments. This would be grades, right? So let me go back and fix this. This was here, right? It's this one. Obviously, this is there's a lot of potential for copy and paste errors, right? But all that is going to go away when we get to JavaScript and React, because it's going to be imports, right? And the maintenance will be in a single function that's going to be reused everywhere. See that, right? But we don't have that just yet, right? Up to this point, we need to deal with this minor issues, right, of copying and pasting and whatnot. Okay. All right, the only other thing here is that this should be aligned to the top of the table, right? So we can change that a little bit by going back to each cell, each column. This TDs stands for table data. We can change the vertical alignment to be at the top. So we can move stuff at the top, okay? And this one here too. So probably all of them should be top, right? Today we would not use this. We would use CSS to accomplish the same thing, but again, we don't have CSS just yet, right? Everybody good? All right. So basically, this is the intent of this first Kanbas exercise, right? And you should be able to follow along and do something similar, right? We should be able to do it in 10-15 minutes or so. Once you've got these 2 here, right, you can now reuse that to implement all the other ones. Yes, right. So, for instance, in the grade screen, this one is mostly for you to practice the fact that you can build tables. You know, tables as they are meant to be used, right, for rendering tabular data, right. And perhaps I should have hidden the names of the students. Right. So you're asked to do something like this, build something like this, this grades, right? So let's do that. let's practice, right, under the grades directory. Under the grades directory, we don't have a grades directory. Okay, let's build a, we have a home, course navigation. Let's create grades. So grades. And we'll have an index in there. Index. Oops. Index. And an index, we're going to have same thing, right? We're going to have a table row, a table, sorry. Table. We're going to have a table row, and we're going to have 3 columns. So we have a TD. Here's going to be the Kanbas navigation, right? We're going to have the three columns. So this is going to be the course navigation, and this is going to be the actual grades, right? And each one is going to have a V line to be at the top. And this probably needs to be border equal 1 and width equal 100%, just so that I can see it, right? So that if I navigate to grades, this is what I have, right? And I would copy and paste those 2 lists in those 2 columns on the left. Yes. Say it again. Over here. Oh yeah, no. So whatever you put in there will be aligned, right? So in this one over here, even if you put this a heading, right, all the content in that column, right, would be up, right? So if you have this H2, it would still be aligned at the top. It's whatever you put in there, the whole thing just by default it's in the center, in the middle, right? And then it bumps up. So it grows from the middle out, right? But then if you say top, the whole thing just justifies to the top. Yep. In grades, we would copy these 2 columns, right? These 2 columns, we would copy them into these 2 columns, right? So the only portion here that we need to learn how to do is the grades themselves. Yes, right? And we can do that in a separate, file, right? So maybe we can create this, grades table just to practice creating that table. So we have we can say table. Again, this would be with 100%. We have the border equal 1, and now here a table has 3 sections. We've only looked at 1, but tables have 3 sections. One is the T head. This is where you would put the headers at the top, right? They would be a little more bold, a little bit darker, right? They would be centered, right? Just to call attention that this is the top of the table. Then you have the T body where you have the actual data, right? Where with each column, each row, and whatnot, right? And then at the end you have a T foot, where typically you would put maybe total values, things that averaged, or summations, or things that are aggregations of the data that is at the top. Yes, right. In each case, you can have several table rows. So you can have a table row in head, and you can have maybe several table rows in body. Typically, in the bodies where you have lots and lots of rows, each one for each record that you're covering, right? In our case, the records are the students and their grades. Yes. For the heading, typically it's only 1 row, but you can have multiple rows too. You can have multiple rows of headings. So in the head, you would have maybe the student name. You have student name. Then you would have the assignments. So this would be assignment 1, right? And then assignment 2. My AI is a little slow today. No, I'm not teaching PHP. And then here we have maybe John Doe, 100. You have maybe Jane Doe. So these are several students with their grades, and they're wonderful students. Right, and so we can navigate here to grade, what do I call it? Grades table. So that table, right, contains my data. So the first one, oh yeah. So sorry. In the first one, notice that I used TD. That's why here it's not highlighted. You don't see it any different than any of the other columns. But this should have been THs, not TDs. TD, TH. TH means T heading, right? So that it's gonna style it a slightly different, right? It's a little more bold, black, it's centered, right? Kind of like brings your eye to its attention. Also, something that we can't do is that we don't know how to do just yet is that what if you have, I don't know, 20 columns, right? And it doesn't fit. Okay, the current implementation, what would happen is that it would cause the entire screen to scroll left and right. Okay, which typically is not what you want. Instead, you want to be able to do something like this. If you go to grades, when you have way too many columns, you want to be able to scroll just a table, yes, right, without scrolling the entire screen, right? Again, we don't know how to do that just yet, right? But it goes all in the techniques of dealing with responsive design, right? Responsive content that allows you to deal with things that are too big or too small, right? That don't fit and whatnot. So we don't know how to do that just yet. Also notice that it's scrolling only the bottom of the table, right? That the top is stuck, right? It doesn't scroll with the rest of the content. See that, right? So only the bottom of the screen is scrolling, but not the top of the screen. So again, when we get to CSS, we're going to learn how to do that, how to make things static, that they don't move, that only certain portions resize and scroll and whatnot. Okay. Right now, we don't know how to do that just yet. So now that we have that content, right, we should be able to just copy that. Well, actually, no. Do we have anything else in the grades? Oh, we have a couple of input fields. So let's talk about the input fields. So let's see. We got a couple buttons. Okay, so we know buttons, we know drop down, so let's not do that just yet. So let's talk about input fields, right? Actually, this is a combo box. It has things that you can type and a drop down. So that's pretty cool, but let's not do that just yet. This one too, right? So you can type, but it also has a drop down combination. So let's focus just on the input field. So input fields, you have these two input fields. You have a student names, and you have this input field here. So input, right, are like that, right? So you use the tag input. Also, it's a self-closing tag. See that? It's in the same element. You have it's an opening tag and it's a closing tag at the same time. Meaning, it doesn't have a body. It has nothing that isn't inside. It doesn't have like an opening and a closing tag like this, right? Where TH has an opening tag and then has a closing tag. See that? And we call the inside, anything that is in between, we call this the body of the element, right? Or the body of the tag. Yes? Right? Because it's in between the opening and closing, not the input field. The input field is one of few elements that don't have a body. Right? They don't have no body. And we have student names. We can filter by student names. We can filter by assignment name. So let's render that. There's our input fields. Notice that input fields behave as inline, right? They want to flow with the rest of the content. See that? We can fix that. We can say that these students are actually elements or headings. And that's going to break up the vertically, and that's 3 like that. So it's broken up. Maybe I want some spacing here. We can put some spacing using BR. Maybe another one. One more. Some spacing, yes. Also, input fields by default, they accept any piece of content, text, numbers, right? Any character content, right? By default, meaning by default they are of type text, right? Meaning they accept any piece of text, right? But there's actually many different types. Yes. No, they just receive the input, and it's only in the input field. Whenever you want to deal with something, right, is you would have a handler that handles whenever you click on the button. So nothing happens until you do something with the content, and then you can go back and say, okay, well, input field, what's your value, right? You can create event handlers that for every keystroke you do something, you know, like type ahead or things like that, and or to you know, to cause a track of the state of the input field, and we will do that when we get to React.js. But in general, no, you just type and then you go and look what the value is later on. Yep. So by default, these are all type text, but there are actually multiple different versions of the input fields. You can be a checkbox, you can be a color picker, you can be a date picker, right? There's all different types of input fields, right? But by default, you are just a plain text field. That's by default. You can also be an email. So for instance, only email characters would be allowed, right? Or you could be a telephone, right? So only things that numbers, parentheses, hash, right, commas, things that are allowed, dashes are allowed in a phone number, right? Also, a great thing about having all these different types of input fields is that, in particular on phones, right? They pop up the correct keyboard. So, for instance, if you make it a type date and you click on the input field, the phone will pop up the date picker, right, or the date keyboard, right? Or if you put numbers, if you say number, then you would only get the number keyboard, right? Where there's no alpha characters, right? A through Z. You can't type that. It has to be a number, right? So you can improve the interface, right? For users much better, right? I mean, I hate when you go to a website, they're asking you for a phone number, right? And they pop up the the alpha text keyboard, right? And you have these really tiny numbers to peck at, right? It'd be nice if they go a little bit further and they would have said, oh, it's a number input field, right? And the the number keyboard comes up, right? Or the phone keyboard comes up. So that's just bad design, right? Just lazy design that they didn't go that further, right? But you won't do that, right? So this allows me to type in whatever text. I can also give users a hint of what I expect them to type in there. Notice here that see that there's kind of like this gray, light gray hint of what it is that they want me to type in there. It says student name, search students, yes, right? So notice that when I type in there, it goes away when I start typing, but if I delete the content, notice that it comes back. See that? Kind of like a little hint of what you want me to type. So to do that, you can use the placeholder. Placeholder allows you to provide a sample text that you want me to type in there. So if it's student name, I can type in example like Joe, Jane, right? So that if I refresh, notice that it shows this kind of like light gray example of what I want you to type, right? So that I can go in and as I start typing, it goes away. But if I delete everything, it comes back. Yes, right. I can also give the same a different type of example by creating like a tooltip, right? So like if I hover, maybe I can give some more verbose instructions, and for that we can use title. You can use title. It says type the usernames of students you want to filter. Right, so I can give a little more verbose explanation. So if I hover now, notice that it appears as a small little blurb, right, where it gives me an idea of what is that you want me to do there, right? Make sense, right? And that's true for any element. I can put a title on this heading, on this piece of text, anything, right? And it'll always pop up if you hover over that content, right? So title is an example. So title is an example of an attribute that can be used across all elements, right? Whereas placeholder only has a meaning, right, in the input field, in the input elements. Yes. So some attributes are specific to an element. Some of them are applied to all elements. Make sense? All right. Okay. All right. So we're done implementing this sort of. Right? Anything else? Let's see. Okay. So we're not going to get into these drop downs. The combo boxes. I don't think I asked you to do that in the assignment. We will do something similar later on when we get to React.js and whatnot, but not quite yet. Anyway, so we can copy this, and we can now go into our grade, right, and just paste that in here. We can paste it in there. We can go into our course navigation, copy that, and paste that in here, right? And in the Kanbas navigation, where is it? It's this one to be, copy. And we can just paste that in here, right? So that if we now go back to just grades, right, we have the sort of the beginnings of that screen. Make sense? Pretty good? All right. All right, so let's see. Okay, so this assignment, I think you get the picture, right? You can copy and paste these links. These look like they're lists of lists, right? For the assignments, drop downs, buttons. I do want to spend some time talking about the editor for the assignment. That's a little more challenging. It has lots and lots of input fields, right? And let's talk about that, right? So this assignment editor screen occurs when you click on an assignment. It navigates to the editor so that you can edit the assignment. Okay. In reality, it behaves slightly different. Like if I go to an assignment, if I actually go to an assignment, in the real implementation, when you get to an assignment, you have to navigate and then click on edit to get to the form, right? Looks something like that. So I simplify the behavior slightly, right? So that when you click on the assignment, you're already in the editor, right? There's no point like an in between. But this is going to give us a chance to play around with lots and lots of different input fields like checkboxes and date pickers, right? So let's take a look at those so that we can introduce those elements as well. All right, let's take a look at that. So let's see. So in the so we have home, grades, course navigation. We want the assignments. In assignments, we have index, obviously, index. And then we want the under assignments, we want edit assignment or assignment editor, assignment editor, right? And this will be an index. So this index is going to have, again, you're going to have the layout of, you're going to have the the Kanbas navigator, the course navigator, and then the actual editor, right? The actual form, right? So these two we already have, right? So we would need a table that has 3 columns, of which 2 of them we're going to paste those 2 sidebars, and then we're gonna need to just implement something like this. Let's focus on this side for now, right? So we have an input field at the top. We already know how to do that. This one's slightly different. It's like a big text area, right? With it's very wide and it has a lot of several rows. Drop downs we know. We already know input fields. Checkboxes, we haven't taken a look at that just yet. You know, we have this kind of like a checkbox group, so grouping several checkboxes. We'll see that in a minute. We don't have radio buttons here, but we can play around with radio buttons as well. A couple of drop downs, a couple of text date pickers. So let's play with these next. All right. Okay, so let's inside of the assignment editor, let's create the form. We'll call it let's call it assignment editor or just editor. So this has what? Let's see. It's got the assignment name. Maybe this is H3 assignment name. It has an input field with a value, so an input field. Now, to give an input field a default value, meaning it's already populated, it's pre-populated with some default value, you can use the attribute value and give it the text that you want to show there for you to type. Typically, this would come from a server, right? You would go out to the server comes back with some data, and then you pre-populate the form, right, with the data from the server. We don't have that just yet, right? So I'm just going to hard code the value in there. And we can see our progress by navigating to, assignments, and then assignment editor, and then editor. Yeah, there we go. So we can see our progress. Yes. What else? Let's see. Put that over here. Then we have this text area, which is kind of fancy. It's got some it's kind of some kind of UI that allows you to do rich text format, which we don't have that yet. So I simplified it for you. For what you're doing is just a simple text area, right? Just a simple text area, just like that, right? So let's do that. So to create a text area, we use the field, the input called text area. Text area. There we go. So there's a native element called text area, which by default creates multiple rows for you to type in there. And so we can see that rendered here. That's how it renders. Again, all input fields by default are inline elements, right? They want to flow from left to right, right? If you want to add vertical spacing, you have to deliberately do that either with a break, right, to break it, right? And you can add many breaks. Right, you can add multiple breaks and just adds vertical spacing. Yeah, although usually that's considered bad practice, right? To use even breaks at all. Right? Today we would use CSS to accomplish the same thing, right? We would take the element and give it a block display, right, so that it wraps, and it would use margins and paddings, right, to add some white spacing. But right, until we get to CSS, I'm just going to add a simple break. Okay. Then what do we have? We can give it some default value. So to give it default value, you would think that you would use the value attribute, right? But no, that's not the case. Default values go inside of the text area, right, between the opening and closing tag. When we get to JavaScript, you will be able to set the value programmatically using the value attribute that doesn't exist. Okay, you can set the value, but that's when we get to JavaScript, right? Up to this point, it's text. It goes right between the opening and closing tag, right? So this is the description of the assignment, right? So now you can render that and notice that that's the content. Yes, right. Now, careful that the if you start this in a new line like that, because you want to be, it looks prettier if you format it like that. Notice that any actual space in between the opening and closing tags, it's literally adding it to the content. See that? So any additional tabs that you might have here, that's part of the content. See that? You have these spaces in there, right? They're this. You might have added it, because it looks pretty, right? But for formatting purposes. But careful, right? This is literally the text that's going to render in the input field. And that's not maybe what you want, right? Also, you can override how many columns it has. So by default, I think it's like 10 columns wide. but you make it wider. You can say, columns to be 50 columns, so it becomes wider, right? Or you can make it taller. You can say rows, 20 rows, so you make it even wider and taller, right? Also, by default, you get this this little resizing thumb here that you can resize it to a different size, which is pretty cool. You can disable it, but by default, it's available, right? All right, let's not make it so tall. Just 10. There we go. What else? So points, that's an input field. We know how to do input fields. One thing about input fields, let me show you. So this is points, and you get 100. That's going to be a numeric input field, right? So let's talk about numeric input field. So this is points, and this is an input field, and it has an initial value of 100. So value 100. So let's render that. Again, notice that it wants to render as an inline, right? Just from left to right. So if we don't want that, we have to explicitly add the break. Okay. Also notice that it's rendered one above the other, so we need to break it again. We need to explicitly add another break, right? So that it renders one on top of the other. Yes, right. So a few things. So notice that points presumably should only accept numbers, but this one allows me to type text as well. See that? So whenever possible, we should limit, right, or create constraints on what folks can type, right, to make sure that they don't inadvertently introduce bad data. Yes, right. It's just a best practice. Right? So you can do that by selecting that the type is number, right? And so if I refresh, notice that now I can't type any or mistype any characters that are not meant to be there, right? Also, it gives me this new little controller here that allows me to go one by one, above and below, right? But we can add additional constraints. For instance, it makes no sense to make something that has 106 points, right? There should be maybe a maximum of maybe 100 points. Yes. So you can control that by providing a max. You can say the maximum is 100, right? So that if I refresh, I can go down, but I can't go up. Okay, so it limits it. You can also give it a minimum, a minimum 50. We're very generous. Okay. The other couple of things that you can change the step, right? That you can go 5 at a time, right? So that when you go down, it goes 5 or 5 up or 5 down, right? Other things that you can do that is especially useful for phones or tablets or just smaller screens. Notice that this input field is somewhat small to touch, and usually you're poking at it. Usually you would use CSS to make this input field larger, maybe take up the entire screen, which is yay big, right? So it's tiny, but it takes up the whole screen so that you can tap it easier, right, within a small screen. But to make it even easier to tap, one cool thing would be that if you click anywhere around here, like for instance the points, right? If you mistype here, press on points, it'd be nice. It would automatically select the input field as well. That somehow this label at the top would be related somehow to the input field itself, right? So you could do that by using the label element, right? All on its own, it doesn't do anything. Like if I tap it, it doesn't really do anything. Notice it doesn't make it bigger or darker or anything, right? You can't see that it does anything, but you can add behaviors to it. You can now give an input field a unique identifier. You can say ID points. So you can name things and give it unique identifiers. This is different from name. You can give things that you can give any element a name, but the name doesn't need to be unique. Okay. Whereas an ID, it's a unique identifier that needs to be unique within the document. All right. once you associate a unique identifier with an element, you can then associate it. You can say that this is for points. Now you're saying that this label is for the element whose ID is points. Make sense? Right? Now the behavior is that if I click on points, notice that the cursor becomes, right, the input field gets a focus, so you can start typing, right? Now in large screens like this, with mice and whatnot, it's not as relevant, but on a phone, this is very valuable, right? Like in a small screen, the larger the clickable area, the better, right? The better experience that you can give your users. Make sense, right? Especially that we'll see in a minute when we do checkboxes and radio buttons. Those are particularly small, right? Especially on a small little tablet or small little phone, right? So any large area that you provide them will make the experience much better. All right, so we did that. Let's take a look at a few other things. We have drop downs. Let's do checkboxes, online entry options. So let's do that. So let's do and this we'll call online entry options. So online entry options. And for this, we're going to do text checkboxes, right? Where we have 5 checkboxes. So let's take a look at those. So we have so to create a checkbox, we use again the input field. Use the input field, input, right? And by default, if you don't say anything, it just renders like a regular text box like that. Let's add some PR like that, right? So now if I configure this to be of type, I can either make it a radio button, right? I can make it a radio button, or I can make it a checkbox, right? Checkbox like that. So now it renders like a checkbox. See that, right? And I can check it on and off, on and off. And then I can provide a value to it, text entry. So this is maybe text entry. We have the text entry right there, right? And let's create a few of these. So website URL. So we have we have a website. So website URL. We have a media recording. So media. We have a student, so annotation, and uploads. Right, so if we render that, again, by default, they want to render inline. Right? So we can add, we can specifically add breaks in between, like that. There we go, like breaks. Okay, so there we go, right? Now by default, they are unchecked by default, right? Now you can set the initial state to be checked by adding the checked attribute. Checked attribute causes it to be by default checked. Okay, and also notice that again in a small screen, this could be fairly cumbersome to type. Maybe you'll select the wrong one, right? So to improve the clickable area, we can create a label out of all these text fields, right? And then associate them to the unique identifier of that input box. So let's see how we could do that. We can say that this label here, wrap this with a label. Oops. Label. Right, we can give this a unique identifier ID, and we'll call it text entry, right? And then we can say that this label is for the text entry. Right, notice that my IDE is aware of the relationship between label and the input field. So as I type, notice that my IDE is aware of these IDs in the screen, right? So now, if I click on text entry, it toggles the checkbox. Right. So this improves the user experience, right, quite a bit, especially on a smaller screen. And most of your audience who's going to be using your web applications are going to be folks on smaller screens. Right? That is by far the largest, fastest growing demographics, right, of users accessing your user interfaces through web, right, as opposed to desktop or large screens, right? That's getting smaller and smaller. All right, everybody good? So actually, there's two ways of doing this, of associating a radio or checkbox with a text, is either creating an ID, right, creating an ID and then creating a label for that field, or you could do it another way. You could wrap the whole thing in a label. You could wrap both the input field and the piece of text inside a bigger label, so it's in the body, right? And then it'll associate the text, right, with the input field, so that if I click on it, right, it works the same way, right? Either one works the same way. Everybody good? All right. All right. I don't have an example for checkboxes, so let's create an example for checkboxes. We'll have to come up with an idea. We'll do the favorite color. Right. So, for instance, we have H3. We have a favorite genre, and we have several radio buttons. Right. So we have input. So there we go. So we have instead of checkboxes, right, you can select the type of radio, right? And there we go. So we have a couple of checkboxes. My AI is a little slow today. Okay. So we have a couple radio buttons. Now the intent of radio buttons is that they are, unlike checkboxes, typically radio buttons are mutually exclusive, right? Meaning that it's one of these. You can't select several, right? It's one of the, check one of these, right? So you can't both love rock and roll and hip hop, right? So you have to choose one or the other, okay? Whereas checkboxes means that choose all that apply, yes? So choose one or more, whereas radio buttons are for choose one of the following. Make sense, right? So if we render that, again, by default, they render as inline. And by default, they, okay. By default, you don't have these names. By default, you don't have those names. And so what happens is that because they don't know about each other, they don't know that they don't know that they need to be mutually exclusive, right? They consider themselves, independently of any other radio button, yes? So that I can now click on any one of them, see, as many as I want. But I don't want that, right? I want the behavior that these are mutually exclusive, yes? Right, so to accomplish that, we need to somehow associate them and know that they belong to a group, right? And to do that, we provide a name. See that? We provide a name that now associates all the same radio buttons that have the same name are now grouped together. And now that they know about each other, they all belong to the same genre. Now they all behave as they should, right? As mutually exclusive. Make sense? Right? Well, what about if you have multiple groups of radio buttons, right? So for instance, if I have a favorite movie genre, action, comedy, drama. Hello. All right. Okay, so notice that this has a different name. See that? Oh no, they don't. Okay, notice that because they have the same name, I inadvertently group them all together, right? Meaning, these are all radios. All radios. So notice that if I hit choose drama here and I click on hip hop, notice that they're mutually exclusive across the two groups. Yes, because they share the same name, right? So all the radio buttons think they're all in the same group, and they're not, right? So to put them apart from each other, I can change a different name so that they're in different groups. Now these are mutually exclusive across the favorite genre, but movies are also mutually exclusive across that particular subgroup. Make sense? Right? All right, awesome. And finally, another very useful element is the date, right? Being able to choose dates. Yes. Yep. Yes. Yeah. It's the last one. Yeah, the last one. Yep. So let's look at due dates. We have due dates. Let's take a look at due dates. Or assignment screen. And so due dates, you might have several input fields where you allow you to change, select the dates. And for that, we can use the input of type date, right? And that allows you to become a date picker, right? And this date picker, it renders specific to your particular operating system, right? If you're accessing this on a Windows machine, it'll be a different date picker, right? If you access it on Android or iOS or whatever, right, it'll use the native widget, right, that the operating system uses for choosing a date. Okay. Now, also the rendering of the format is specific to the region, the local region. So in the US, right, dates are month, day, and year, right? But if you go to Italy or Europe, it'll be year, month, and day, the way it should be, right? So depending on where you are in the world, right, the browser will be aware of the geographical region, right? It'll format, right, the date accordingly. Okay, that's automatic, right? Also, it'll default to the widget showing you the current day and whatnot. Now you can set the date. You can give it initial value. You can say value. Now this value, regardless of where you are geographically, this value has a standard, right? It's always, the year, the month, and the day, right? In that order. So if I want to say, 2023, 09, September 21, right? It initializes it to 9/21. So it tells you what day it is today, right? Plus the currently selected date. Right? You can also create ranges. So for instance, if you notice that it doesn't allow you to it grays out these dates from the prior month. See that? So you can create your own ranges. You can say, you can set what valid values there are. You can say, for instance, well, no, I want to accept anything earlier than September 7th, for instance, right? So you can give it a minimum. You say, minimum, 2023, 09, 07, right? And so notice that it grays it out. It doesn't even allow you to select it, right? And and you can't even navigate backwards in time, right? For selecting, you can navigate forwards, right, but not backwards because of say that there's a minimum. Also, you can select the maximum. So, for instance, you can say, well, I won't accept a date beyond, September, 28th, right? So for instance, notice that it grays out anything after the 28th, right? And so you can't go forward or backwards or anything like that. Make sense? Yes. The minimum is, yeah, you could do that. Whether then you can't navigate to select something like that, but yeah, sure, absolutely, yep. Dates. I think that's it, right? Forms. Also, you can group together this in a form like that, right? The whole thing can be inside of a form, and the form can point to a place. You can navigate and say that if this gets selected, I want to navigate to, and you can give it the destination of where do you want to navigate. I want to go to Kanbas, say, courses, core, courses, and home, right? So, for instance, if I select this and submit with a button, or if I have a submit button, save, right? If I click on that, it navigates, right, to the destination page that you want. In this case, you went to home, right? Or you can point it to wherever you want. And they'll navigate there. So you can use it as a navigational mechanism as well. All right, excellent. Hopefully this will be useful. I'm going to commit this and push it to the repository. Again, feel free to grab any of this if you want, right, to help you get started on the assignment. Excellent, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, in the